All right. So I did season predictions for the NHL, and I did okay. I had guessed Vancouver was going to drop out of the playoffs. I guessed Boston was going to drop out of the playoffs again, and they did. I got a lot wrong. I thought Montreal was going to win their division. They didn't. Uh, I'm very happy for Roberto Luongo. I think it's a fantastic story. I think the Florida Islanders series has a lot of potential. Now, I sat down last night and I wrote some notes out, and I went through my NHL guidebook. I have the one that they use for all the announcers on Sportsnet and CBC that they take all their notes from. Not necessarily online notes, but I intentionally didn't watch any previews, and I'm doing this before the previews start because I want to not be influenced by what other people are saying. And I don't care about momentum because none of it matters once the playoffs start. Once the playoffs start, it doesn't mean shit who was hot in March and April because it only matters who's hot in that series. So the first thing I want to do is go through miss the playoffs. I want to go through teams that have missed the playoffs and point something out. The Canucks right now, there's a lot of fans going tank, and I agree. Once they're out of the playoffs, just go ahead, lose everything, and try for that top draft pick. But there's a danger. Now, going alphabetically, Arizona. Arizona missed the playoffs this year for the 4th year in a row. It's their 7th time in 10 years. Boston. This is the 2nd time in a row they've missed the playoffs. Buffalo. This is the 5th time in a row they've missed the playoffs. Calgary. Calgary made the playoffs last year, but they've missed it 6 times out of the last 7. The Carolina Hurricanes have missed the playoffs 7 years in a row, 9 out of 10. The Columbus Blue Jackets have missed it 2 in a row and 5 out of 6. Colorado has missed it 2 in a row, 5 out of 6. Columbus has missed it 2 in a row, 6 out of 7, or if you want to look at their entire history, 14 out of 16. The Edmonton Oilers have now missed the playoffs 10 years in a row. The Montreal Canadiens, this was the first time they missed the playoffs in a while. The New Jersey Devils have missed them 4 in a row, 5 out of 6. Ottawa missed it for the first time this year, but the 2nd time in 3 years, and I don't know how well they look for next season either. The Toronto Maple Leafs have now missed the playoffs 3 times in a row and 10 of the last 11 years. Vancouver missed this year, and they've missed 2 of the last 3. The Winnipeg Jets missed this year, and they've missed 15 times out of 17 years in their existence between the Atlanta Thrashers and the Winnipeg Jets. This is the thing where people say, just do a rebuild. Look at Pittsburgh, look at Chicago, and look at LA. Yeah, and then look at the list I just gave. It's easy to tear it down. It's not that easy to build it back up. And you can't just say, well, build through the draft, because all of these teams are trying to build through the draft. And for every success story, there's 3 or 4 failures. Magnificent failures. So, Canucks fans, be careful what you wish for, because that rebuild could last a long time. You have to have the patience to say we're not going to make the playoffs this year, next year, or the year after that. And potentially the year after that. If you want to do the Pittsburgh, the Chicago-style rebuild, fine. You have to be a piece of crap team for about 4 years. And you have to have horrible management. And you have to be willing to watch players that you trade win Stanley Cups elsewhere. So, that being said, let's get to this year's playoffs. I'm going to start with Dallas and Minnesota. Dallas wins their division, somehow. But I'm nervous about Dallas. And I haven't written down any predictions on who's going to win any series. I just wrote down who's playing who, and I'm going to spitball who I think is going to win each series now. Dallas and Minnesota, this is the first time they've faced each other. The Dallas Stars originated Minnesota as the North Stars. They're facing the Minnesota Wild. There's a natural rivalry here. They're division rivals. It should be a really good series. Goaltending could be big. Minnesota's got Dubnyk, who hasn't proven himself in the playoffs. Dallas has Lehtinen and Niemi. Neither of them have been any good in the playoffs in a long time. So that's the key for me, because both teams can score. Minnesota doesn't have the scorers that Dallas has, but Dallas doesn't have the battle-hardened playoff guys. I'm nervous about, and I'm a Dallas fan. I've got Dallas jerseys all over my apartment and Dallas memorabilia everywhere. But the Dallas Stars, if I was going to pick a team that's going to be upset in the first round, I would start with Dallas. That being said, I'm taking Dallas in 6 because I think that the goaltending's a wash. The blue line, I think Dallas has a slight edge on the blue line. But that's almost a wash too. But up front, Dallas is the better team. And with Sagan and Ben, and then just the support players they've got behind them. Janmark's been a revelation for Dallas. Fox is playing better. Dickinson came up down the stretch and he's scored all right. So if these support players can pull it in the postseason, and if the star players for Minnesota like Parise and whatnot balance out with the Dallas players and they just cancel each other out, it's going to come down to depth. And I like Dallas's depth better than Minnesota's. But if you're going to pick an upset in the first round, you pick Minnesota. Anaheim's facing Nashville. Anaheim and Nashville faced each other once. It was in 2011, and Nashville scored the upset. Anaheim and Nashville's only won 2 series in their history. They beat Anaheim and Detroit in the 2 series they've won. I wrote notes down. Anaheim is a funny team. They were shit the first half, and they've had to play gangbusters the second half of the season. They have had to absolutely kill it the rest of the way. They won their division. Nashville's a team that's going to give them fits. I think in goal, I'm going to give the advantage to Anaheim. On the blue line, it's hard to go against Shea Weber. And Nashville's at a point where they need to win something. They need to give something to their fans for the fact that they make the playoffs, but they're not really a contender. So Nashville needs this. I'm going to regret this. I'm going to take Nashville in 7. I'm going to say that Anaheim has used up so much to get here. And guys like Kessler, I've watched Kessler wear down over a season as a Canucks fan, and I know Kessler's been fantastic so far in the second half. I got a funny feeling this is where an upset happens and Nashville knocks them out. It just seems to me like it's a natural point where it's going to happen. LA and San Jose. LA and San Jose played each other in 2011, 2013, 2014. San Jose won the one in 2011. LA won the ones in 2013, 2014. LA missed the playoffs last year. Now they're back in the playoffs and they're playing San Jose again. The last series they played against each other, San Jose blew a 3-0 series lead to LA. So you would think, I'm going to say San Jose. If you're not really a hockey fan, I don't see LA going out. I don't see Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau magically having a Stanley Cup run in them. I'm watching these guys on here and they're talking about, oh, well, Anaheim avoided San Jose and now they get to play a wild card team in the first round. Yeah, they get Nashville instead of San Jose, and I'd rather play San Jose than Nashville. Because San Jose is in decline. This year, San Jose, what they did this year reminds me of what Vancouver did last year, where they got one really good year out of the Sedins, and everything came together, and they made it. And I think that's where San Jose is right now. And I really think they're going to get exposed by the Kings. I think the Kings are going to take them out in 6. So that's my prediction there. St. Louis, Chicago. Chicago has an 8-3 lead over St. Louis in the 11 times they've met each other in the playoffs. Their last meeting was in 2014, which Chicago won. And I wanted to go back and see just how many Chicago has won, but it's probably been a lot over the last 6 years. St. Louis probably hates hearing Chelsea Dagger as much as Canucks fans do. That being said, I became a Blackhawks fan last spring. I have no reason to believe the Blackhawks are going to fail this year. Crawford makes me nervous. Crawford was hurt down the stretch. I haven't heard yet whether or not Crawford's going to start in the playoffs. Scott Darling's a good backup. I don't know if he can carry a team in a series in the playoffs. He may need to. He played well last year in the playoffs, so I'm not sure second-guessing him. But St. Louis has had really good goaltending down the stretch. Elliott and Allen, I don't like Brian Elliott. I like Jake Allen. But, in a 7-game series, I don't know. I just don't know if I can see the Blues beating Chicago. I just can't. I think Chicago will be 9-3, and I think they win this series in 7. I think it's hard-fought, rough series. But I think the Blues go back to the beginning again and ask themselves if they'll ever be good enough in the playoffs. I feel bad for St. Louis, even though I'm cheering for Chicago. I feel bad for St. Louis. So during this series, when I actually watch the games, I may be cheering for St. Louis. But I just don't see them knocking Chicago out. And I see a hard-fought series. I say it'll go to 7. if Crawford's hurt, or if he tries playing hurt, this St. Louis could knock them out. And St. Louis has home ice advantage, but it's never been an advantage before. St. Louis is one of those teams that plays well and gets a good spot in the standings, and then in the playoffs it just all falls apart. They haven't been back to the Stanley Cup Finals since their second year in existence, 1968. So, or was it 1970? May have been 1970. I remember the Boston Bruins beat St. Louis in the final. It was a 4-game series. And that was because the West sucked. All the good teams were in the East. So the Blues made the final, but you could put an asterisk next to that and say it was impressive they were in the final, but they were against all expansion teams and the Chicago Blackhawks, who were in decline at the time, ironically. But in this series, I got to take the Hawks. You can't go against the Hawks. They got Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, Duncan Keith, who's going to be rested after the suspension, and Seabrook, and there's so many weapons in Chicago. There's so many guys, and they're all battle-hardened. They're all tested. They're all well-known. They've all won cups. And St. Louis has Tarasenko, Steen, Bouwmeester, and a lot of question marks. Their goaltending is going to be a question mark, even though they played great. It's a question mark. Because until you've won in the playoffs, nobody gives a shit what you do in the regular season. So, Chicago in 7. So that's the Western side of the board. We go East, and it becomes basically just take dice and throw them, and it's random. There's no real clear-cut favorite. Now, the first series was Washington-Philly. They've evened out their series. They've beaten each other twice in the playoffs each time. I was surprised they've only faced each other 4 times because they were in the Patrick division in the 80s. But I don't think they were ever both really good at the same time, so they never really played each other. And Philadelphia won the last time they met in 2008. Washington won the President's Trophy. They should be a running away favorite for the Stanley Cup right now with the way they played all year. The problem is they're Washington. It's the same problem the Canucks had in 2011. They could run away with the league, but you still knew they were the Canucks, and you still knew they were vulnerable. Somebody knew they were vulnerable. And the Chicago Blackhawks almost came back and won from a 3-0 series deficit against those 2011 Canucks. So as much as people look back at 2011 and go, oh man, it was great. If Burroughs hadn't scored in overtime in Game 7, and the Hawks had skated down the ice and Taves had put it in the net, all we would remember of the Sedin-Luongo era is how the Canucks never got past Chicago. And it would be this great hated thing in hockey circles in Vancouver. So it just shows how sometimes it's a toss of the dice. And that's what this Washington-Philly series is. Philly is hot. I know momentum doesn't mean anything. I said that at the beginning. But Washington is also not on top of their game right now. They've been playing flat. They benched their starting goalie in the last couple games of the year. You look at these things, and once you start resting players for the playoffs, you're playing a dangerous game because you're betting that they can turn it back on when the playoffs start. And the Capitals are not a team that's shown that. Now, I am taking the Capitals to win this, and I'm taking them to win it in 5. I think Washington is a good team. Almost great. I almost said great. And Justin Williams is one of the best playoff scorers there is, and the fact they picked him up last year was brilliant. And Philly, I think, overachieved, and Ghost has got to run out of steam here. Ghost Spear has just been amazing on the blue line for Philly. I'm not a big Philly fan, but I got to say, the blue liners they've got coming up in Sanheim and Provorov, and they've already got Ghost Spear. I'm telling you, Philly is going to be really, really impressive within 2 years. If those guys develop, if Sanheim and Provorov develop, holy crap, Philly is insane. Because up front, you've already got Giroux, you've already got Voracek, you've already got good players, and they're not old players either. But this year, right now, Washington's the better team, and this should be a 5-game series. Washington should win this and not really have to break a sweat. Florida and the Islanders, they've never met in the playoffs. The Islanders haven't won a round since 1993. Florida hasn't won a round since 1996. Florida has no playoff resume to speak of. The Islanders have no playoff resume to speak of since 1984. And this I am so excited about this series because I want to see Luongo do well. I want to see Yager do well. I want to see The Islanders give them a good fight, and I want to see Florida win it. This is the hardest first-round series to call in my eyes. I'm going to take Florida in 5, and I'm saying why 5 for this reason. Halak's been hurt, and the Islanders' goaltending hasn't looked fantastic without him. Greiss is a good goalie. Never done it in the playoffs. Luongo, and he takes a lot of shit in Vancouver, and he takes a lot of shit around the league. He's a good goaltender, and his playoff numbers are not nearly as bad as people make him out to be. They make him out to be Dan Cloutier. And Cloutier, great regular season goalie, not great in the postseason. Cloutier got hurt. There are reasons Cloutier was bad in the postseason. It's not just he was a bad goalie, because he wasn't. But Luongo has good stats, and he's had good series, and I think the Islanders are a team he matches up well with, and I think this is a 5-game win. I think Jágr's driven to try to win one last Stanley Cup. I think his entire career right now is, I'm not too old, go to hell, and I think that's going to play very well in the playoffs for him. So I'll take Florida. Pittsburgh and the Rangers. Now, Pittsburgh has a 4-2 lead in terms of series between the two teams, but the Rangers have won the last 2. They won in 2014. They won in 2015. Can they make it 3 in a row? It is hard to go against the Rangers because every part of their team looks really strong. Pittsburgh had a shit start to the year. Sidney Crosby was invisible. He wasn't even in the top 100 in scoring. By I think the 20-game mark, he wasn't in the top 100. He's number 3 in the scoring race at the end of the year. Crosby is easily the MVP of hockey right now. It's not a coincidence that they started playing better when Malkin got hurt. Not a coincidence. And it's not Malkin's fault. This is the one problem I've always had with Pittsburgh. They have 2 superstars in Malkin and Crosby. And they're both centers. So they can't play together really other than on the power play. If they moved Malkin and they made that dramatic, what are they thinking move, and everybody would go, what the hell? They could shore up their blue line, get somebody of Letang's level to play with them on that blue line. Potentially get that to push Fleury out. And you could be looking at a dynasty in Pittsburgh based around Sid the Kid and what they got for Malkin. I'm taking Pittsburgh because it's very hard to knock a team out 3 years in a row. Ask the Canucks. The reason they knocked out the Hawks in 2011, part of it is that Dave Bolland was hurt. Let's be honest. But part of it is that they'd already lost twice to that team, and they were bound and damned determined not to lose the 3rd time. Pittsburgh's got that going for them right now. Lundqvist hasn't been playing very well. His confidence is down. He's been frustrated. He doesn't even look like he likes his defenseman in front of him half the time. I've never seen him this frustrated, and I think it's going to carry over into the playoffs. Probably not game 1, but by game 4, it's going to start. So I'm taking Pittsburgh in 6. I think Pittsburgh has what it takes. If Fleury can play net as well as he did in 2009 and not be the guy he's been every year except last year. Last year he played well in the playoffs. This team in front of him just didn't show up. But he's been very hot and cold. You want to see a Dan Cloutier, look at some of the series Fleury's had since he won the Cup. But I'll take him this year. The last series, Tampa and Detroit, they met in the first round last year. And Tampa won it in 7. And Tampa was lucky to win that in 7. Detroit gave them one hell of a fight. It's a tough call because Stamkos is hurt. Tampa without Stamkos is weaker. Doesn't matter what kind of a season Stamkos had. No, he wasn't a threat for the Richard Trophy. But Stamkos is a key guy in Tampa. And I'm going to say this right now. If Tampa wins this series, and if they make any noise in the second round, Yzerman will consider losing Stamkos. If they get slaughtered by Detroit, Stamkos is a member of the Tampa Lightning, and Drouin's not going anywhere. If Drouin is a key member of the team when they win, Drouin's not going anywhere. If it's a close series, you never know. But Stamkos moves if Tampa does well in the playoffs. I don't think Stamkos is happy in Tampa. I don't think Yzerman's a big fan of Stamkos. I'm starting to get the feeling Yzerman isn't a big fan of a lot of guys. And Yzerman probably isn't as popular as I thought he would be as a GM. I never thought anybody disliked him as a player, but it's just something you get that feeling out of Tampa. Like there's players who just don't like dealing with him as a GM. So because Detroit has a lot of weaknesses, and I think Detroit's hanging on by a thread to stay in that playoff hunt, I'm taking Tampa in 6. But it's a tough call. Because if Mrazek gets hot, and if Datsuk's going home to Russia, which is what I read today, he's going to want to go out as a winner. So he'll be driven to do something to help Detroit. And with Datsuk and Zetterberg's on his way out soon too. I believe Franzen's already on his way out. With key guys on their way out and veterans, you're looking at guys like Nyquist, Tatar, Brandon Smith, guys who haven't done it before. Kronwall really isn't number one defenseman material either, so it's hard to count Detroit out, but it's tough to look at them too and say, oh no, they're gonna do something against Tampa, because Tampa's fast, they've got depth. Their blue line is fantastic. Their goaltending with Bishop. I mean, if Bishop plays anywhere near as well as he did last year, this could be a sweep. But I'm taking it in 6 because I think Detroit has some motivation to do well. I just don't know if they can. So those are my picks. Tampa, Pittsburgh, Florida, Washington. So all the favorites in the East. Chicago, or all the home teams. Chicago, LA, Anaheim, and Dallas. Or no, Nashville and Dallas. So I'm taking Chicago and Nashville, which are not the home ice teams, in the West. Now here's a game. Teams I cheer for don't win in the first round. I proved that last year. If I cheer for a team, they will lose in the first round. Now, it's tough this year because there aren't very many teams I cheer for. If you're going to bet strictly on teams Shannon will not pick to win or will not be cheering for, you will take the following: Anaheim, San Jose, St. Louis, Philly, the Islanders. Pittsburgh, the Rangers is so tough. Pittsburgh, and Detroit. If you take those 8 teams and you win out, you're welcome. Because usually the teams I'm not cheering for win. It's like I said, it's hard this year because there aren't any teams I really cheer for in the playoffs other than Dallas. So Minnesota's the one you picked there. But, and Anaheim over Nashville would be where you... So, I mean, if Nashville pulls off the upset over Anaheim, I'm going to be just tickled. That might be something I want to watch over and over and over again because I really don't like Ryan Kessler. So, alrighty, those are my first round draft picks. First round playoff picks.